what a long, strange journey it's been for Sunsoft. They started out as a bottom-tier publisher, even releasing the game that was responsible for coining the term kusoge, or crappy game in Japanese. But starting in 1988, they really managed to turn themselves around, releasing a few all-time classics, and also a few missteps. But now, at the end of 1991, we have reached peak Sunsoft. The next 4 games that they publish are all-time greats, and some of the most technically advanced games on the system. The only problem was that in 1991, no one was buying Famicom games anymore. All 4 of these are rare, but because they're also extremely good, prices have risen rather sharply, and they're all members in good standing of the 10,000 yen club. Games where you could expect to spend at least 10,000 yen for a cartridge-only copy. In fact, that's rather underselling the price for 2 of them, since one of those 4 regularly contests the top spot for most expensive Famicom game. But we'll get to that eventually. Hebereke is a platformer. Kind of. Really, it's a Metroidvania. Yes, even though it preceded Gekka no Yasuyoku by about 5 years. In fact, I'd go so far as to say Hebereke is the first Metroidvania that actually stands out as a Metroidvania. Yes, I'm including the original Metroid there. Earlier action-adventure games in this mold were either lacking some essential piece, or more likely were a bit fumbling. What Hebereke offers is a giant map that you can freely explore, and tons of power-ups that you use to open up new paths. The core gameplay is explore until you find the new power-up, then use the new power-up to find areas you couldn't get to and explore them. Repeat until you're at the end of the game. The plot of the game is that because of a war between 2 superpowers, a dimensional rift was opened, and Hebe the penguin was pulled out of his world. Hebe finds friends and adventures on his way home. One of the key features of Hebereke is that there are 4 different characters that you control. Naturally, they each have different movement abilities that will help you out. You begin with Hebe the penguin, who's the fastest character, but for some reason is terrible at swimming. Hebe also has the highest jump. The first ally Hebe gains is Ochan. She's a furry. She goes around in her cat costume and acts like a cat. Ochan floats on top of the water, and she's also the only character who can jump on icy surfaces. The next friend is Sukezamon the ghost. His special movement ability is that he can float, letting you cross large gaps. Finally, there's Jennifer, and he's a catfish. He can walk around underwater, and also will swim if you mash the jump button repeatedly. There are additional things that can be picked up and used by every character. Everyone gets a special attack, for example, where you hold down the B button until the heart appears, and then you have to push B again in order to attack. I didn't find these abilities to be too useful. The heart goes away after a few seconds, so you can't hold on to it until you need it, and the enemies that I encountered at least weren't very difficult to deal with your basic attack. And the special attacks don't affect bosses. Ochan and Jennifer's special attacks are useful for opening paths, but that makes them keys, not things you'd want to use regularly. Hebe can also get a set of suction cups that will allow you to climb walls by mashing the jump button. Of course, you hit A to jump, and your regular attack is actually a little bit tricky. You have to jump into the air, and then press and hold down to stomp on enemies. If you're not pressing down, then you'll get hurt when you land on them. Enemies that you crush like this will leave one of 2 things behind. They'll either leave behind a small dot that will heal you for 2 points of life, or they'll leave behind this big ball. Hitting B while you're standing next to the ball will pick it up, and then you can throw it with the B button. The ball is how you defeat bosses, and when you first encounter your friends, you'll have to beat them in a fight like this. There will only be 1 ball and you're both trying to control it. For other bosses, when you stomp on them, they'll drop a ball. For your life bar, you always start out with 10 health and have a maximum of 49. There is medicine you can find that will heal you to maximum, but these are one-shot items and they are very rare. When you're in a showdown against one of your friends, you're not using your regular health, you have points that you're given specifically for that fight. Early on in Hebereke, you'll be given arrows that will direct you on the right path, but those stop pretty quickly. Fortunately, you don't have to explore blindly. The first few items that you're going to come across, because they are placed directly in your path, will really help you get around. You can immediately get a jewel that gives you a password so that you could continue, though when you continue, you're always sent back to the start of the game with 10 health. Kinda like Metroid there. You can also find a map that will show you the layout of the entire game, and then a compass that will flag your position. With those in hand, you really shouldn't get lost, though you might have to figure out a few things. I don't think it'll come as a surprise that Hebereke is really highly regarded in Japan. It's one of the masterpieces of the Famicom, and unfortunately, Sunsoft never really followed it up. The Hebereke characters do become their mascots throughout the 90s, and as a result star in a lot of games that are titled something Hebereke, but none of them are platforming games. There's no Super Hebereke that takes the Metroidvania in a new direction. Obviously, this one's brilliant. The only flaws I find in it are tiny, like I don't like how you have to press down to hurt enemies. But that's minor compared to everything else in Hebereke. The world's great, it has charming graphics, the character designs are fantastic with tons of animation. My real biggest complaint about Hebereke is that I really wish there was more of it. This is about as good as the Famicom can get.